Okay, today we're doing part 3 of our series on the 10 animals listed in Torah. Today the plan is to cover 4 animals, Ayal, Tzvi, Yachmor, and Akai, that are listed in the beginning of the second pasuk. And just before we talk about Ayal, just mention that the letters Aleph, Yud, Lamed spell the names of 2 different animals, 2 totally different animals. If it's an Ayal, is a ram. That was Seg Savim. It's a sheep, kind of a sheep. And the one we're talking about now is Ayal, and that is a different animal. It's a chaya, it's not a behema, and it's not a sheep. Okay, so the Gemara says, the Gemara in Yuma says that an Ayal has branched horns that grow back more and new branches every year. Okay, that's a very clear description of the antlers of many types of deer that fall out every year, and they grow back more elaborately and with more what they call points each year than they had previously. The Septuagint translates Ayal as elephone, which Rabbi Kaplan says that means a deer. And in fact, the Latin name for the red deer is the Cervus elephus, which the word cervus means a deer, and elephus, which is similar to which from the word elephone specifically means a red deer. And we'll get more to the Septuagint what he says about Ayal when we talk about the next animal. So the antlers of a red deer are exactly what the Gemara says, which is say they grow back every year, and they get bigger and grander to the point that they can even have as many as 12 points on top of them. And other animals that are like that, that are like this red deer, that have these similar features about their antlers, are elk, moose, and reindeer / caribou. It's the same thing. Although they're a drop different than the red deers, but they're rather similar. Their antlers are rather similar to that. Not only that, but the antlers are so unusual and so grand that it sure seems like that's a very much an identifying feature of the red deer and the elk, etc. And so for now, let's say that an Ayal means red deer. When we get to Yachmor, which we're coming to in this same share, we'll talk about which deers belong into that category. And then we're going to see in a second when we get to in a second some others who might think differently than what we just said. Okay, but for now, we're going to assume in Ayal that it means the red deer and other similar deer-like animals that have these unusual, they have these antlers that grow back new every year. They grow bigger and broader, etc. Okay, now let's move to an animal called Tzvi. So I mentioned just a second ago that the Gemara in Yuma describes the horns of an Ayal, and it says they're maftsilos, which I translated as branching out. Now the Gemara in Chulun says that the opposite is true of a tzvi, that its horns are not mifutzalas. Okay, so in that second Gemara, the Gemara in Chulun, there's a machlekes rishonim what the word mifutzalas means, and then as a result, what the word tzvi means. Because Rashi says, look, mifutzalas means branched, which is what I was saying until now, according to that simple translation. So he says, well then, tzvi obviously does not mean a deer, which was colloquially what people called tzvi, the deer, they called it a tzvi. He says, because tzvi has branched horns or branched antlers. He says, and the Gemara says that a tzvi its horns are not mefutalas. So it can't be, Rashi says, what we call a tzvi, that we call it tzvi, is obviously not what the Torah called it tzvi. Okay, what Rashi thinks, we'll talk about in a second what he thinks a tzvi is. But it's not, Rashi says it can't be deer. Taisha says, no. What we call a tzvi, we call it a deer, and in fact that is exactly what it is. It is a deer. And the word mifutalas, or Taisha maybe a different case than mifutalas, doesn't mean branch like we think it means. No, it means something else. It means it points straight up, and it has at the end it's like hooked or bent at the tip of it. Okay, and the word tzvi means in the Torah means, according to Taisha, means a deer also. So I'm not going to spend the time on it now, but Professor Zohar Amar shows how in the Paiskim in Hilchas Treifes, the word tzvi over there is assumed to mean deer. That a tzvi the Paiskim use the word tzvi to refer to a deer. That doesn't yet mean that's sort of like Rashi and Tosfos thought that also. That's what he called it. That doesn't mean that in in the Torah, that's what it means. Okay, now we have a question on Taisus, because I told you the Gemara says that the horns are mufutalos, and Taisus tries to say it means a certain description, that it's points straight up and has a hooked or bent top in. But the Gemara really says a little bit more. The Gemara says, Ma ayal azu, karnehu maftilas lakan ulakan. Goes in this direction and that direction, and then it says Ma ayal azu calls them magdal's karnehu maftilas. They get more and more. They are more and more maftilas. Okay, so that sounds perfectly fine if you think that mefutalas and maftilas means, like we said, branched, like we were saying, but. And some they get lakan and they get bigger more and more. It's not at all clear what Taisus is how he's going to understand those words of the Gemara. It doesn't just use the word mefutalos. It gives a little more bigger explanation, which I don't really know what Taisus is going to say, how he's going to explain that. Now, Taisus doesn't say which animal he thinks is the Ayal. Again, the Gemara said that the Tzvi is not mefutalos and the Ayal has horns which are mefutalos. Okay, Taisa said that means it's pointed sort of straight up with a little bent at the end or curved at the end. He doesn't say what that is. Okay, but some possible candidates, according to Taisus, would be the chamois and the generuk. I don't know if I'm pronouncing those right. I hope so. And reedbuck and springbuck, which again, because we're doing this without pictures, it's hard to show what they are. But all those are animals that have their horns sort of point straight up with a little hooked type of end at the end of it, toward the top of it. Okay, now. Back to Rashi for a second. Rashi says that Tzvi is not a deer. He says it can't be that it means a deer. He says so maybe it means an Ibex, a Steinbock. It's an Ibex, which it could be anything. Could be. Just the question is that Rashi in Chumash says that Ibex is akoi, which we're going to talk about in a minute. What an akoi is, in which a lot of people think that's what it means. So it can't be an Ibex. Can't both be a Tzvi and an akoi. So I don't know what the answer is going to be for Rashi. How could Rashi say the same thing for two different animals? I have no idea. Now, the Rambam and the Septuagint say that a tzvi. So what we're holding at now is that there was this machlokes Rashi and Tosfos. Rashi and Tosfos, whether tzvi means a deer or tzvi does not mean a deer. Now, the Rambam and the Septuagint say that tzvi means a gazelle. Say that it means a gazelle. And that fits very well with a lot of things that Chazal tell us about the tzvi. It says, first of all, in one place, in the Gemara Ksuba says that a tzvi is the fastest of all the animals. Now, there may be other animals that are drop faster, but Lamaisa, a gazelle, is one of the fastest animals, for sure. It could go 60 miles an hour, but what's unique about it is that it could maintain that speed for a very long time. Other animals could just do bursts of it, a very fast speed. It supposedly could do it even for up to 20 minutes at that speed. Okay, and Sichas Chulin, he says, Rabbeinu Yonah says, when the Mishnah says you should be Rutz Katzvi, he says is the reason why you should be Rutz Katzvi, pick that of all animals, is because the Tzvi doesn't get tired out even if it runs for a long time. So you should be Rutz, not just Rutz for a short amount of time quickly, but even hold on to that for a long time. So, so one thing is that the Chazal tells that a tzvi is the fastest animal. It says it has very lean meat. The Gemara in Ksubas has very lean meat, and also the Medrash says that it's known for its jumping. Okay, and in fact, again, I wish I could show you the videos of this. Gazelles are very much known for their stotting or pronking, it's called, and they jump literally several feet in the air. They could jump over another gazelle if they wanted to. As while they're in the middle of running, they could do this jumping. A very unusual feature, which the Medrash says is true of a tzvi, which again encourages us to think that tzvi means a gazelle. Some of these could be fine. Deer have some of these features, but all of them are seemingly much more intense for a gazelle than a deer, and for sure much more than an ibex. Now, there's two other things that Chazal tell us about deer, which Taisa brings up, and that is one is that once you take this hide off, it contracts and you can't get it back on. Ain't machzik bizarre. That's a common ksubas also. Another is that it sleeps with one eye open and one eye closed, which seemingly refers to what's called a unihemispheric slow wave sleep. That's in a medrash. Taisa in Chulin says both of those are truths about deer. I have no idea whether they are or aren't, and I for sure have no idea if they apply to gazelles. Okay, so anyhow, so one question we could ask is if we're going to say that Tzvi is a gazelle, okay, it's not. Let's say we're not like Taisa, so we're not going to say it's a deer, and Tzvi means a gazelle. Rashi, this was this fun thing. He says it's a an ibex, which we don't know what to do with, because Rashi says other animals are ibex. So if we say it means a gazelle, we have a little bit of a question. And that is, the animal Ayal is a red deer, and we're going to see in a second that a Yachmor is a different kind of a deer. So why would Tzvi, which is not a deer, be in between those two? We have deer, one kind of deer, skip an animal and another kind of a deer. Why wouldn't we put the two types of deer next to each other? You would think they, in logic, I don't know, we would think that they should go together. So why is the Tzvi, if Tzvi means gazelle, why is it in between them? Why is it separate in between them? So one thing is, it could be we totally have the order wrong. In our minds, I'm saying to you, of course, deer should be next to deer. Maybe not. Maybe it has to do with, maybe there's a different way the order goes. Maybe the order is, for example, most common to least common. So, say some say even of the most common animals, cows are all over the place, and then sheep and goats, and it keeps going down in a matter of order, getting all the way down to the zomer, which we're going to see is a giraffe. It's like a really unusual animal. Well, maybe it has to do with the size of their horns, or some other order. Maybe the order is not just put deer next to deer, but maybe there's some other kind of an order that makes more sense. Or actually, maybe just because in English I'll skip that. Okay, another thing is it could be that the Torah is specifically putting gazelle between two types of deer to tell you that these three, which have certain similarities, that they're very lean animals. These three animals are actually one unit together. That's why they put like this together. And the only difference between them is their headgear, what we call their headgear. That Ayal and a Yachmor have antlers, but they're not the same kind of antlers. They both have antlers, and a gazelle has horns, and horns and antlers are not the same. So the animals would be the same. The Torah is telling us, put these three together because they would actually all be the same, except for what the obvious difference in them is they're different types of what we call headgear, horns and antlers. If that's true, it also could tell you that anything with these kind of horns, with these kind of features, that has horns instead of antlers, automatically gets included in what we call Tzvi. So then Tzvi wouldn't be just gazelles; it would be other animals that seem like similar but have horns instead of antlers, and that would mean all different types of antelopes, including this what's called a four-horned antelope, dukier, generuk, and impala. Okay. That's what I'm just thinking, that maybe if we include all these similar type animals that happen to have horns instead of antlers, then it include all those. Now, there are some antelopes that have quite unusual horns. Some might be considered ta'oi. If you hold that ta'oi is oryx, we'll get to that Mirza Hashem next time. And some very small antelopes might be part of Dishoin. We'll get to that also next time. But a lot of the animals that are similar will fall into the category that we call into Tzvi then. Now, last time when we spoke about Izim, I mentioned that the Mishnah says that Izim are Klayim with a Tzvi. The Mishnah is saying even though they seem similar, no, in fact they are Klayim with each other. Now, if Tzvi would be Ibex, like this Rashi mentioned in passing, we can understand that because Ibex is a kind of a goat. It's a mountain goat, actually. We call it in English a type of mountain goat, and it has a lot of similarities to regular goats. So you can imagine saying, well, even though they're similar, they're still Klayim with one another. But if Tzvi is a gazelle or a deer, then it had nothing to do at all, not at all similar to a goat. Why would the Mishnah put those two together and say, you might think they're the same, but they're really not their Klayim? Okay, like for example, the other ones in the Mishnah are ones, again, that when you look at them, you say, hey, they might be the same. Like one pair is wolves and dogs, or small dogs and foxes, or horses and mules and donkeys, and mules and wild donkeys. Okay, so those are the ones that seem like obvious choices. They seem like you would imagine they're a match, and the Mishnah is telling you they're not a match. But ours over here, Tzvi and A's, we at first would not see what the connection is, and we'll talk about soon. Or the other one that's hard to understand, which is Ayal and Rachel. I'll get to that soon. But for now, why would, if Tzvi means gazelle, or even if it means deer, what does it have to do with? How is it similar to a goat that you might think it's Klayim? So, first time around, I don't know if you remember in the first shir in this series, I mentioned that the way you decide if a fruit is similar to fruits are Klayim with one another, or they're the same min, is I mentioned that it depends on the leaf shape and appearance and even nutritional values. In other words, they might not have the same appearance. Okay, appearance is just one of the things. It might not have the same appearance, but they're min because they have some other feature, like their leaf, the shape of the leaves of the tree, or they have some nutritional values. So it could be that looking alike is not the only thing that's going to make a difference. Okay, so here's two possible reasons of what might make tzvi and ace. Once we accept that they don't have to look alike to be in the range of one min, that you could think they're one min, or they actually could be one min for other reasons, then here's two possibilities. First is like this. We're going to mix together a few things of Chazal and the place come together, and between them, see a similarity. First is like this. The Gemara in Bechira says that one way to decide whether animals can breed with each other and produce offspring is depends on whether they have the same gestational period. Does the female hold the child inside for the same amount of times? So that means to say is if they have a similar gestation period, that means is they have that's a certain similarity between the animals. The Rambam says you should know that has to do with the Mishnah that we just said. The Rambam in Hilchos Klayim says has to do with the Mishnah. He says like this: you would think that animals which can crossbreed with one another are one min. That the Mishnah didn't say that. The Mishnah just talks about these specific choices. He said, but that Gemara over there in Bechira, essentially, the Gemara in Bechira says that mixed breeding, being able to produce a child together shows that they're similar min. So the Rambam says you would think that animals that can breed with each other are considered one min. He says no, lav dafka, not necessarily. And then he goes, and therefore certain animals, A's and Tzvi, including A's and Tzvi, are climbing with one another. In other words, they might not look alike, but the fact that they have it in common, that they have the same, that there are other things that they have in common might make you think that they're alike. And the last piece that we need to make this sense is the Gemara says in Chulin, the Gemara has different opinions about what a kfi is, and one of them is that a kfi is a breed, a crossbreed between an A's and a Tzvi. Between A's and a Tzvi. So the Gemara is telling us that A's and Tzvi can breed together, and they make this thing called a kfi, which, at least according to one opinion, that's what a kfi is. They can crossbreed. So, if the Gemara tells us in Chulin that they could breed, and the Gemara says in Bechiris that if animals, the Gemara says in Bechiris that animals that breed together, that's a similarity, that they have certain similar gestational periods, and that makes them like one animal. The Rambam says, and that would be a reason to think that that's kind with each other, wrapped all together, gives us a fine havamina for what the Gemara meant when the Mishnah said that A's and Tzvi might be considered Klayim, Kamashon that they're not. There's what to think about. There's at least we see it now, a similarity between them that would make us think that they're Klayim with one another. Okay, another reason to think that they might be Klayim is, Rashi says, by the brachas, when Yitzchak was trying to get the brachas from Yaakov, Rashi says that the taste of goat's meat, of the izim, is similar to the meat of a tzvi. In other words, Esav went out to catch a tzvi, which his father liked, and she was going to substitute that by giving gedi izim, a goat. So it could be that in itself, the fact that they taste alike, is another reason to think that they might be claiming with one another, to which the Mishnah is therefore tell you that they're not. Okay, anyhow, let's move on. Tzvi is a chaya. All the these are going to be chayas. Okay, Tzvi is a chaya. Let's move on to Yachmor. Okay, Rav Saadia Gaon says that the word Yachmor in Lashon Kodesh is the same as the Arabic word for the animal, and it means a Roe Deer. Okay, now, and the Septuagint says Yachmor means, I'm not going to say this right, pigargon or pigarg, which Rabbi Kaplan says that really means the white-rumped animal. Okay, now he says that the white-rumped animal means a pronghorn, which is it's a kind of an antelope. I mentioned it in I think the first part of the series. It's a white rump. It has a white rump, which is very white. The whole rump is white. But Lamai says that Rav Saadia Gaon says that it means a Roe Deer, and Roe Deer also has a white rump, not as big as the pronghorn, but it has a white rump. And therefore, I'm going to assume that that's what the Septuagint meant also. Now, what if Roe Deer is Yachmor and red deer is Ayal? Well, what's the difference? What's the difference between them? It happens to be this, knowing that they're both kinds of deer, might help us explain the Gemara, understand the Gemara in Bechiris about a Yalid Yali di Yachmorta, which is when a male Ayal can't mate with a female Ayal can't mate with a female Ayala, instead he mates with a female Yachmor, then this is whatever comes out because of that. And the Aruch says that it's because the Yachmor is similar to an Ayala. That's why he goes to her as his second choice. He can't find an Ayala, so that would work well with what we're saying, that Ayal and a Yachmor are both types of deer. They're relatively similar. They're not the same, but they're similar, and that could be why for that Gemara. Anyhow, so if back to the question, if Yachmor means a Roe Deer and Ayal means a red deer, well, what's the difference between them? I mean, to us city boys, a deer is a deer. What's the difference between them? So one is that the Gemara says, I mentioned this Gemara, the Gemara says that an Ayal has antlers that grow back larger and larger every year, and that's a feature of the red deer. It's not a feature of the Roe Deer and many other deers. Okay, they don't grow back bigger and grander every year. Another thing is that a red deer has antlers that are very large, up to, as I mentioned, up to 12 points, and the Roe Deer has these very dainty little antlers with just 3 points on them. Also, the red deers are much bigger than Roe Deers, and the red deer, at certain times of the year at least, has a red tint to its skin. Okay, so if we're right that these differences between the horns, the antlers of a Roe Deer versus the antlers of a red deer, then Ayal, which was the red deer, includes, as I mentioned, the ones that get larger and grander every year, which would be, as I mentioned, elk and moose and reindeer / caribou, and the Yachmor will be for the smaller deer who have simpler antlers that grow back the same every year, which is like the axis deer and the muntjac and the pudu and maybe even fallow deer. Okay, now, this is all assuming that antlers are so different from horns, like we said in the first part of the series, that everything that's in Yachmor has to have some kind of antlers. It can't have horns; it'll have to have antlers. You could argue and say that no, antlers are not inherently so different than horns. Again, I didn't think so, but you could argue like that. And it's more that it's not that they're antlers versus horns, but rather that because they're branched versus straight, or versus unbranched, so to speak. Okay, if that would be true, then Ayal would still have the ones with the grand horns, like the elk and moose and reindeer, and maybe it would get axis also, the axis deer, and Yachmor would be for simpler branching of horns or antlers, and then it would include pronghorn, because pronghorn has horns, but there has a little bit of a branch, has a prong to it. Okay, and then it would not include muntjac and pudu, who they have antlers, but their antlers are not branched. So if the difference is antlers versus no antlers, then all those animals fit into Roe Deer. Then all those antler type animals fit into Roe Deer. If the difference is it branched versus not branched, then these animals have antlers, but they're not branched. They wouldn't be included. In which case, the muntjac and the pudu might end up being in Dishon, which is going to be coming next time. Okay, and our last animal for today is the akoi. Okay, now before I tell you what an akoi is, I'll mention the following. There's a term, a Latin term, called hapax legomena. That's not from Harry Potter, and it refers to words that appear only one time in all of Tanakh. Okay, so the people who figured this out, the scholars who came up with this, said it's about 1,500 hapax legomenas. Oh, there's probably a better way to say that. But really, that includes even ones with the same shirish can be in different ways. But there are 400 words 400 shirashim that only appear one time in Tanakh. Okay, and of those 400, about 70 of them are in the Chumash, and 3 of them are in this pasuk, Akoi, Dishon, and Zomer. Okay, the other ones, Yachmor and Ta'oi, are elsewhere. So, of our animals over here, 3 of the animals are used words that are never appear anyplace else in Tanakh, and actually, it makes it a little more confusing. Is that the animal that we call Akoi is mentioned elsewhere in Tanakh, but it gets a different name. We'll see in a second that has a different name there, and the animal called Dishon, we'll see next time, also is in Torah and the Tanakh has a different name. It's called Re'em. It's called a different name. So isn't it what's going on in our pasuk that it chooses to list these animals by names that in no place else in Tanakh, even if that same animal is listed elsewhere under a different name? A little strange. Now, Rabbeinu Bachya says that the names of the 7 chayas in this second pasuk Each one is being maramis to another place in Tanakh, which reinforces the idea that the animal is kosher. Not sure why it needs support, why the Chumash needs support from that, but somehow he's telling us there's something unusual about the names that are here to help us direct us to other psukim. So maybe there are deeper things going on here that we're not getting. That this is pointing to something deeper here. These strange names that don't appear anyplace else in Tanakh. There's a reason for why they're using these strange names. Okay, now let's go. What is an akoy? So Rashi says. Rashi on the psukim over here says that the targum of akoy is Ya'ala, and Rashi says that's an alternate. The Hebrew name for Ya'ala is Ya'el, which is a pasuk used in Eiv, and over there the targum of that pasuk also says it means Ya'ali Sela, the Ya'al that goes in a cell in a tinra, Ili tinra. I'm sorry, the pasuk says Ya'ali Sela, and the targum says Ili tinra. Tinra means a rock, and Rashi, using a French word, and the Chizkuni say that means an Ibex. Okay, and an Ibex is it's a wild goat, and it has really unusual skills to scale mountains and rocks. Again, I wish I had a video for you because I could show you how they run up and down rocks in ways that are really unusual. And it has another feature for us is that it has these very long, unusually long, rounded horns that go in a semicircular shape, and they have like ridges on the side of them. And Rav Saad Yugon also agrees with that. He says that that akoy in Arabic is a wa'al. I probably didn't pronounce that right. And the Ram Pirush Mishnayos also says that same thing, which is the Arabic word for ibex. Okay, and pretty much everyone seems to agree that a ya'el. I'm sorry. That the akoy in the Torah means Ya'el, and that Ya'el means an ibex. But I'm going to mention some who disagree. But first, I'm going to mention some questions on this shita, on this assumption, again, which most people do assume. I mentioned two questions. First, like this: the Mishnah says that a Ya'el is similar to a Rachel, a female sheep, but it's not similar enough, and therefore it's klaya. Now, if we compared an ibex to a goat, we would get that why you should call that. But what is it? Ibex have to do with a sheep. They don't seem to be alike at all. They don't seem like anything similarities to them. Okay, now it could be. So it could be one answer is I mentioned to you earlier that if animals can breed with one another, then that's a reason to think that they're one min. And the Gemara says also. I also said that the Gemara says animals with similar gestational periods are considered to be can breed with one another, and in fact, ibex and sheep both have a gestational period of 150 days. So that might be a reason. So maybe that's a reason to think that they're alike because presumably they can breed with one another. Okay, there's a derech remez here. I'm going to skip that for now. Okay, the second possible answer is, the second question is, that the Mishnah says that the horn of a Ya'el, as compared to an Ayal, a ram, the difference is that a ram's horn is kafuf, and the Ya'el's horn is pashut. Okay, so most people assume that the word kafuf means that it's bent or curled, and pashut means that it's straight. Okay, that's really nice until you look at an ibex, and you look at an ibex, you say, "There's no way you could think that this is a straight horn." It's not corkscrew like a ram's horn, but it sure isn't straight. It's round. It's like a half. It's a very large, and it's a semicircle. So what does the Mishnah mean to say that a Ya'el's we got a lot to do still. That a Ya'el's horn is pashut. What does that mean? So some people want to say is that it's relatively somewhat straighter than that. Okay, but if you say that, I mean, not only is it hard to read into the Mishnah, but if that's true, just about every horn out there is going to be considered straight. Almost nothing is as kafuf as a ram's horn. Maybe a Margor and an Argali and Mufflo and Raka, Elan, maybe a kudu would be kafuf, but there's come out nothing else that's going to be. If this is considered kafuf, if this is considered. If an ibex's horn is considered kafuf, it's hard to imagine anything else. I'm sorry, is considered pashut. It's hard to imagine anything else being considered kafuf. So another possibility is that the terms kafuf and pashut don't refer to the shape of the horn, but rather it has the direction that it grows, which is to say, is a ram's horn grows downwards. Okay, it makes this circle, but the circle starts pointing downwards, while an ibex's horn grows upwards. Okay, the ibex's horn, again, I wish I could show you a picture. The ibex's horn goes up from its head and then comes around back, like sort of back to his ear, as opposed to the ram's horn that goes downwards and then comes back up to the ear. Okay, so so the ram's horn is someone who's bent over; it's facing down. So kafuf doesn't mean round or rounded; it means it's bent, as opposed to the ibexes, which is pointing more upward facing, which is more like defiant and not bent over. Okay, now. But we could think of other choices to try to give other explanations that would maybe get us away from these questions of why did it compare the Yael to the Rachel, and why would it say that the Yael's horn is pashut? So one is, the Septuagint says that akoi means an animal called, we would call it trigolaphus, which are these medium to large size antelopes that have these spiral horns, like a kudu. It has a spiraled horn. That's what it's talking about. Now, I just have to mention, some versions of the Septuagint have no translation for the word akoi, okay, which is strange as anything. It has no translation. But the one that I was looking at had this translation. I'm not even going to try to say it in Greek, but it ends up being things with this spiral horns like a kudu. Now, so if the Septuagint agrees that akoi is Yael, which it doesn't say, it just says that it's this animal. If it is, then it means that Yael means a kudu instead of Yael meaning an ibex. Okay. Now, kudus are not like sheep, and kudus' horns are rather curled. They're straighter than ibexes. They're still curled, but so it's not really going to help us for this. Well, it would help us where to put animals, but it won't help us with answering our questions. But there's another explanation for Yael, and that comes from the Aruch. And the Aruch says that Yael is a kispa. It's a female sheep. Okay? So lots of people, that's what he says. Yael means a female sheep. And they say, what? Yael is a female sheep? Yael is the translation for akoi. So if akoi means a female sheep, well, a sheep is a seik savim. So sheep are kind of behemoth that's a kesev. How can a Yael be a female sheep? It doesn't make any sense. How does that go together? And then also they say, the Mishnah says that it's client to have a Yael together with a sheep. He says, really? Well, if Yael is a female sheep, what would be the client between a male sheep and a female sheep? That doesn't make any sense. How can they be client with each other? I'm sorry, it's a kispa with a rachel. So a female sheep with a female sheep, that made no sense. Okay, so a lot of Rishonim, a lot of people, they just say this doesn't make any sense. The Zerua says that no, you don't have it right. The Aruch understands that he agrees that Yael usually means an ibex. He agrees that Yael means ibex, means akko. He agrees with that. He's only saying this for this Mishnah that says that the horn of a Yael is straight, which we said doesn't make any sense because the Yael's horn is not straight. So he said that Mishnah, the Mishnah was talking about when it said Yael there, it meant a kispa, it meant a female sheep. But usually Yael, of course, doesn't mean that, and he agrees that Yael doesn't mean that. Okay, so that would be an answer. So what he only means it by this to explain this one Mishnah. Okay, but why would we say such something so strange that the word Yael usually means ibex, and over here it means a female sheep? Like, what would that be? So of course you could say, well, you had to say pshat in the Mishnah, but it's not so wonderful. Okay, so Lamaisa, the Aruch, according to the Aruch at least, he would be answering the question from the Mishnah, which is that the Mishnah is saying that a Yael, if Yael means a female sheep, so then the Mishnah, when it says you should use the horn of a Ayal instead of the horn of a Yael, it means to say is use the horn of a male sheep rather than of a female sheep, because the male sheep has this curled round horn, and the female sheep, even when it's an adult, the kispa has a straighter horn. Okay, and okay, let's leave it like that. Okay, anyhow, that wouldn't answer the other Mishnah, but at least it would potentially answer that Mishnah. Okay, there's other things to say here. I'm going to leave out here with the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi gives a different answer, a different explanation for why you should use a Ya'el or an Ayal. Okay, I'm going to leave that for now. So anyhow, just to summarize, the simple understanding is that most people assume that the word Ayal, Akoi, means Ya'el, and Ya'el means Ibex. But we still have Mishnah. We don't have good answers. We still leave us with questions from two different Mishnayos of how it uses that term Ayal. I'm sorry, the way you use Ya'el. It uses Ya'el in ways that seem strange. That doesn't seem to make so much sense to us when we say this in Ibex. But again, most people think like that. And if I didn't mention it already, an Akoi is a chai. It is not a behemoth. Okay, so we will leave here for now, and next time we will do Mir Hashem, the last three animals in the pasuk: Dishoin, Ta'oi, and Zomer.